Welcome to another episode of Mind Talks. Today, we are going to talk about something that might sound complicated but is really important for our planet: greenhouse gas emissions, and how mining companies are part of the story. If you're wondering what on earth are Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, don't worry. By the end of this episode, you'll understand them clearly, no jargon included. Yeah, sounds like a big topic, but I'm excited to dive into it. Emissions seem to be one of those things we hear about a lot, but not everyone gets the specifics.
Exactly. And before we dive into the meanings of these scopes, it's good to know where these terms came from. Back in the early 2000s, two organizations, the World Resources Institute, WRI, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD, came together to create a clearer way for companies to measure and manage greenhouse gas emissions.
They introduced the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and within that, the three scopes were born. It's part of a global standard that helps companies around the world understand and track their emissions more effectively.
So these scopes are kind of like a universal language for companies to understand their environmental impact.
Exactly. It's a system that simplifies a complex issue so that companies, whether it's mining or manufacturing, can take actionable steps to reduce emissions.
But first, let's talk about what greenhouse gas emissions actually are.
Right, because that's the foundation of it all, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Greenhouse gases are things like carbon dioxide and methane. They trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, and that's what causes global warming. A lot of things we do, driving cars, running factories, release these gases, and mining is no exception.
But here's where the scopes come in. Experts break these emissions down into three categories to make it easier to manage.
Okay, so what's scope one all about?
Scope 1 is the easiest to understand. It's the emissions that come directly from the activities a company controls.
For example, imagine a coal mine. The big trucks and machines they use run on diesel fuel. When those trucks burn fuel, they release smoke. That's scope 1 emissions.
So it's all about what happens right there on the site, at the mine itself.
Exactly. Scope 1 emissions come from the company's own equipment and activities.
Okay, I'm following so far. But what about Scope 2? What does that involve?
Scope 2 is a bit different. It includes emissions that come from the electricity the company buys. Most mines need a lot of power to run machines, lights, and ventilation systems, but they don't make that electricity themselves.
Instead, they get it from power plants, which often burn coal or gas and release emissions in the process. Those emissions are Scope 2, emissions caused by the electricity or energy a company buys, even if they don't directly create it.
So, scope 2 is all about the energy companies rely on, even if they don't generate it themselves.
Exactly. It's emissions from the energy the company uses but doesn't directly control.
Got it. Now, scope 3 sounds a bit more complicated.
It is actually. Scope 3 includes all the other emissions related to mining, but not directly produced by the mine itself. For example, think about the machinery, chemicals, and equipment used in mining. They all have emissions from when they were made. But the biggest part of Scope 3 is what happens after the minerals leave the mine.
Let's say we are talking about iron ore. Once it's mined, it gets sent to steel factories. Making steel releases a lot of emissions, but those emissions aren't from the mine itself, they're from the steel plant.
Or with coal, the biggest emissions actually come from the customers who burn it to generate electricity. That's all Scope 3.
Oh, I see. It's like the emissions that happen further down the line after the product leaves the mine.
Exactly. Scope 3 is about everything connected to mining, especially what happens after the minerals leave the site.
So, for mining companies, scope 3 can really add up.
You're right. Scope 3 can often make up the largest portion of their total emissions, up to 95% for some companies. It shows just how important it is to think about the entire supply chain, not just what happens on site.
And that's why mining companies need to look at all three scopes if they want to make a real difference in fighting climate change.
Exactly. Scope 1 and 2 matter, of course, but tackling Scope 3 emissions can have a much bigger impact.
Let's take some real world examples. In a coal mine, methane gas leaks out as they dig up the coal. That's scope 1.
The electricity used to run machines or pump water underground. Yep, that's Scope 2.
And when customers burn the coal for electricity, that's scope 3.
Exactly. It's a whole journey from mining to the end use.
So, what can mining companies do to reduce these emissions?
For Scope 1, they can use cleaner fuels for their trucks and machines. For Scope 2, they can buy or generate clean energy like solar or wind power.
But for scope 3, the real challenge is working with suppliers and customers to reduce emissions across the whole mining process.
That sounds like a big task, but it's the only way forward.
It's definitely a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. By understanding and managing all three scopes, mining companies can make a big impact on global emissions.
So let's recap. Scope 1 is emissions from the company's own operations. Scope 2 is emissions from the energy the company buys. And Scope 3, that's all the emissions connected to the mining process, especially what happens after the products leave the mine.
That's right. And with that understanding, both mining companies and all of us can play a part in reducing climate change.
Thanks for breaking it all down.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share. Next time, we'll talk about how new technologies are making mining cleaner and greener.
See you soon.